They said water was calm, gentle, harmless. But in my hands it became a weapon and a curse. When the rain stopped, they feared me. But I wasn't born to be their savior. I was born to rewrite the tide of fate. This is the tale of Mizu Zokusei no Mahoutsukai, the water magician.
During a phone call, Ryo is told to stay calm and listen carefully, as the call concerns the tragic death of his parents. Lying in front of a truck, his consciousness slipping away, he hears that perhaps everything unfolded as fate intended. His initial feeling is neither fear of death nor relief, but a faint sense of regret, though he's unsure why. He also feels a touch of self-pity, knowing the next day would have been his 20th birthday. Suddenly, he finds himself in a strange new world filled with thrilling adventures and the wonder of magic. He clashes swords with a woman and faces various foes, fighting many battles, though his full story will unfold later, as the concept of reincarnation feels like pure fantasy to readers. Yet for Ryo, it's undeniably real, turning his life upside down. Confused, he hears a voice ask if his name is viralmanhwa, and he confirms. The voice notes they haven't had visitors in ages and informs him he died in an accident. A man explains that, in rare cases, people from Earth are reincarnated, transferred to another world after death, a process called samsara on Earth, and Ryo is this time's chosen one, still bewildered. The man presents a straightforward choice. Ryo can reincarnate in another world with all his memories intact. Surprised, Ryo compares it to an isekai story, and the man agrees, saying it's a fitting description. Thoughtfully, Ryo says he has questions for the man. His first question is whether the man is God, but the man denies it, explaining he'd seem like an angel from Ryo's perspective. Processing this, Ryo mentally nicknames the man False Michael and wonders if his thoughts are being read. His second question is why he's being reincarnated, to which the angel responds that they don't make those decisions. The entity Ryo calls God decided without sharing the reason with the angel. Ryo's third question is what he should do in this new world, still feeling lost. The angel calmly explains that Ryo can live as he pleases, with no specific instructions provided. Pleased, Ryo thinks he could live any life he wants, choosing a peaceful one, and accepts the offer. The angel, delighted by Ryo's acceptance, begins describing the new world. False Michael explains it resembles Earth, but includes magic, while gunpowder and firearms are scarce. Ryo asks if the new world truly has magic, learning that Earth once did too, though it's no longer practiced. As Ryo processes that Earth had magic, the angel prepares to reveal the new world. A globe appears, and it's announced that this world is called Fire. Smiling, the angel shares that 1 in 5 people has a magical aptitude, and Ryo will have one for water magic. Disappointed, Ryo asks if he can switch from water to fire or earth magic, but False Michael explains that magical aptitudes, granted by the gods at birth, are fixed and unchangeable. Ryo then asks if he's permanently stuck with water magic. With a gentle smile, the angel clarifies that water aptitude is highly valuable since humans rely on water to survive. Moreover, 80% of people in the new world can't use magic, making Ryo exceptionally fortunate. Ryo reflects that water and sodium are vital for survival, and in a medieval world, not worrying about water is a significant advantage. Excited, Ryo asks False Michael if water magic includes healing abilities, but the angel clarifies that healing is linked to light magic. Though let down, Ryo accepts this explanation. The angel then explains elemental magic to him and notes that non-elemental magic exists, but urges Ryo to focus on mastering his water magic. He mentions that Ryo's physical abilities are above average, and that in Fae, improvement depends on effort, not levels or skills. When Ryo asks how to strengthen his physical and magical abilities, the angel explains that, like on Earth and in Fae, humans grow stronger through regular exercise and practice. False Michael wraps up by encouraging Ryo to commit to his development, assuring him that hard work will yield results. Worried, Ryo realizes that without dedication he won't thrive in this new world. After more explanations, the narrator indicates it's time for False Michael to inquire about Ryo's plans. Enthusiastically, Ryo expresses his wish to live quietly in a remote area. Smiling, the angel chooses to reincarnate him in the Rondo Forest, providing 2 months of food and mentioning a 100-meter protective barrier around the house, advising Ryo to learn magic for hunting. He also points out a beach southwest of the house where Ryo can collect salt from seawater. Realizing he forgot an important question, Ryo asks how to use magic. False Michael explains that he must clearly visualize the magic and practice consistently, as mastery doesn't come instantly. Ryo vows to work hard and expresses gratitude to False Michael for his guidance. In an instant, he awakens in a cot inside a plain cabin. As he gets up, he notices the cabin's old, medieval appearance. Stepping out of the room, he sees a sturdy table with 2 books and a few chairs. Overlooking the books for now, he explores further, discovering a bathtub in another room, which reminds him of Roman public baths. He feels thankful for his private one, suspecting false Michael designed it with his Japanese heritage in mind. He also ponders the angel's gender. Moments later, he recalls the books and goes back to examine them, finding one is a guide to monsters and the other describes local plants. A note from false Michael reveals that food is stored in a silo outside, which also serves as a freezer, confirming the angel could read his thoughts. Ryo comments that he doesn't have a typical isekai appraisal skill, remembering false Michael's caution about this. He finds a knife, attaches it to his belt, and notices nothing else significant in the cabin. Ready to step outside, he exits and is struck by the vast, stunning landscape. Looking at distant mountains, he wonders if dragons or beasts inhabit them and decides to avoid them. As he takes in the view, the reality of being in another world fully hits him. Meanwhile, false Michael reflects on how wonderful it would be to one day have a physical body and live a peaceful life like Ryo's. False Michael reflects that Ryo will eventually discover something significant, and while checking his screen, he notices a hidden ability, puzzled by its presence. He recalls seeing this ability only once before in a girl, when he began working in reincarnation 10,000 years ago, and wonders what Ryu's ability could mean. On the screen, it's revealed that Ryo's hidden ability is eternal youth. Ryo, now in his new world of magic and swords, is eager to try his new powers. His water magic is his only skill, and he recalls false Michael's advice to visualize the magic, focus, and think about water. Closing his eyes, Ryo is amazed when he opens them to see water bubbles floating before his raised hands, realizing it's his first time using magic. Remembering false Michael's teachings, he watches a water bubble drop to the ground, understanding that spells aren't needed, and wonders if this world follows the same physics as Earth. He also remembers the angel's warning about the barrier, that he must be ready for combat before leaving its 100-meter protection. He can't venture beyond it unprepared, with only 2 months of food left in the silo and just a knife as a weapon from false Michael. Even on Earth, fighting a wild boar with only a knife would be impossible, so facing monsters in Fae is unthinkable. This leaves Ryo with one other weapon option as he fills his bathtub with water. He realizes the key to his magic is mentally picturing what he wants. Deep in thought, he visualizes hydrogen bonding, understanding that knowing how something works allows him to imagine it. With this, he creates a thin water lens, ice, and manages to boil and unfreeze water. Suddenly, he collapses on the bathroom floor, exhausted, realizing he's depleted his magic. On his 5th day in Fae in the morning, he cooks a rabbit from the silo, noticing false Michael left only salt for seasoning, preserved by some magic that keeps the food frozen. Ryo has been refining his skills in hunting and cooking meat perfectly. He also studies the dense beginner books left by the angel. While eating and reading, he thinks about learning to heal, make antidotes, and create fire without a water blade. As the sun sets in Fae, he naps several times during the day. He repeats the cycle of forming and melting ice to hone his magical abilities. While practicing again, he notes he can create ice in 5 seconds, but can't make it fly, though his water always floats during the day. Ryo gathers ingredients within the barrier, goes on long runs to build his strength and magic, preparing for hunting, and at night he trains by creating ice and evaporating water. Every day he follows this routine, and by the 13th day in Fae, with a knife attached to a stick with ice, he holds magical water bubbles in one hand and an ice knife spear in the other. He feels confident in his magic progress. He then considers naming his new technique, settling on Ice Spear, despite still being unable to make ice fly. His goals for the day are to find detoxifying herbs and a stone for starting fires. With determination, he feels excited to tackle his objectives. He steps outside the barrier for the first time, armed with his spear, planning to head southwest to the beach false Michael mentioned. Ryo carefully navigates the shadowy forest, stepping over small rocks and obstacles. Emerging from the dark woods, he's stunned by the breathtaking scenery before him. A sparkling river stretches across his view under the bright sun. Captivated by the landscape's beauty, he reaches the river and chooses to descend the mountain he's been climbing. As he makes his way down, Ryo spots something on the ground and crouches to inspect it. Examining closely, he discovers quartz, one of his goals for the day. He's surprised at how easily he found it, knowing it will solve his problem of starting fires at home. Continuing his journey along the riverside, he reasons that heading northeast will keep his house to the left, ensuring he always knows its location and where to flee if danger arises. As he walks, he thinks about Fae's monsters, wondering if he could defeat some but remains uncertain. Recalling his second goal of finding detoxifying herbs, Rio tries to remember tips from the book. Suddenly, a noise behind him makes him turn, startled to see a small boar. The creature charges fiercely toward him, and scared, Rio struggles to react. As the boar rapidly closes in, he desperately dives to the side to avoid its attack. Sprawled on the ground, he sees the boar preparing to charge again. Still recovering from a leg injury, he notices the boar rushing at him once more. His hands touch the earth, and the path between him and the boar turns into a slick sheet of ice. Caught off guard, the boar slips, unable to control its movements. Rio gets an idea, realizing that although he can't make his ice spears fly, his current skills might suffice. As the boar slides toward him, it crashes into giant ice spears he created. Exhausted, Rio collapses, relieved as the impaled boar lies dead. After this life-or-death struggle, he starts eating less silo food, relying more on his kills. He learns that monsters in this world use magic, with stronger ones wielding more powerful magic. False Michael had told him that the more he uses his magic, the stronger it will grow, and monsters have been using theirs since birth. As Rio slowly learns to overpower them, his abilities improve steadily, step by step. While cooking a large piece of boar meat, a defeated giant boar lies behind him. He discovers that the key difference between animals and monsters is a magic stone near the heart, which only monsters have. The boy learns that a monster species determines its magic use, and Rondo Forest monsters have nearly wiped out regular animals. Still, Rio occasionally spots surviving animals like crocodiles and swift rabbits. Regardless, carnivorous animals remain dangerous to humans, though they're less of a challenge than monsters. In this world, monsters dominate the food chain with their strength, and their magic makes things far more complex. Focusing on a new monster, Rio recalls that the book had already described the creature. The creature, a horned bison, effortlessly crushes giant crocodiles and uses wind magic to make its charges deadly. Abruptly, something unforeseen drops from the sky, severing the bison's head from its body. Rio approaches the fallen bison slowly, remarking that his new water magic guillotine is impressive. He then notices something in the water consuming the bison's head. Drawing closer, he observes the rapid pace at which it's being eaten. He realizes a fish, akin to an earth piranha, was drawn by the blood in the water. Rio diligently maintained his water magic training routine as much as possible. He became highly skilled at controlling his water jet's speed, able to pierce anything except magical shields. He invented a water saw, a high-speed spinning water disc that cuts through objects, and ice rollers to aid in manual tasks and processing hunted animal hides. Rio trained his body as rigorously as his magic, knowing monsters are unpredictable. A snake's tail darts toward him at high speed. A giant kite snake emerges, and he recalls it uses wind magic to wield its tail like a sonic sword. Rio faces the snake fearlessly. The snake slices through a nearby rock with its sonic tail as if it were paper. Having dodged swiftly, Rio steadies himself, planning his counterattack with water bubbles circling him. Staring at the snake, he notices a light rain falling over them. Rio raises his hand, concentrating on every raindrop around the snake. The snake lunges at him with ferocious intent. Completing his focus, Rio makes a swift gesture, and massive ice spears impale the snake, killing it instantly. The snake's venom was neutralized by the rain, which could likely resist boiling water. However, some monsters, like the assassin eagle, which uses wind magic and supersonic speed, were immune to Rio's simpler tactics. Rio sprints at high speed, pursued by the assassin eagle. The eagle slams into the ground with immense force, knocking Rio aside. Regaining his footing, Rio readies a close-range spear attack on the eagle. He believes he struck it, but the eagle darts backward, avoiding his blow. He grazes near its eye, thinking a direct hit to the eye would have felled it. This was the toughest monster he'd encountered yet. Focused on defense, he feels his counterattack saved him, but another monster could appear during a fight. The monster book from False Michael was an impressive collection with detailed creature descriptions. As a beginner's guide, Rio assumed intermediate and advanced versions existed, noting 2 special pages at the book's end. One page featured a dragon illustration, the other an Akuma, a humanoid monster. These pages were for those aiming to be the greatest, but Rio had no such ambitions. He only desired a peaceful life and focused on living it. Rio marks his first full year in the new world. On a moonlit night, he confronts what appears to be another humanoid figure. A year after arriving in Faye, at a lake in the northernmost Rondo Forest, with the moon nearing its peak, the Dylan Headless Warrior appears before him. Rio ponders what the Headless Knight is doing in the Rondo Forest and where it originated. The knight's true power lies in its exceptional swordsmanship, and its absence from the beginner's monster books suggests it's either not a monster or far beyond beginner level. If the Dylan avoids magic, Ryo decides he won't use it either. The knight, however, is a masterful swordsman and arrogant, declaring it will train Ryo regardless of his wishes. Injured and thrown to the ground, Ryo reflects that it feels like this after landing 3 attacks that would have killed anyone else. The knight turns away from him. Mounting its horse, it rides off, as if expecting Ryo to improve next time. Ryo is unsure if his attacks affected the knight, as he couldn't land a clean hit. His determination grows daily. His first loss was nearly instant, but this battle lasted an hour. Ryo moves faster now, predicting the knight's actions during combat. Yet when his ice sword clashes with the knight's blade, it shatters completely. Stunned, Ryo stares at the headless knight, who then unleashes an attack that sends him flying several meters. Lying injured, Ryo notes he at least landed 3 hits this time. As Ryo rises, the knight stands still, as if awaiting something. It draws its sword, places a hand over the blade, and makes it glow brightly. The sword transforms, growing larger and changing shape entirely. The knight hands the blade to Ryo, mounts its horse, and rides away, leaving him with the new weapon. Kneeling with the sword, Ryo sees it as a gift from a master to a student. He resolves to train harder with his new weapon. After facing the assassin eagle, he knows what's needed to grow stronger. Each morning, he does 30 minutes of physical exercise to build muscle. He runs while pushing his magic to its limits and practices sword fighting. With the headless knight's guidance, he learns the right hand guides the blade's path, while the left supports each strike. His strength and speed improve, and in his second clash with the assassin eagle, which brought a partner, the first eagle had lost an eye in close combat. This time, it won't repeat that error. Exhausted from dodging both eagles' attacks, Ryo anticipated this. Using varied magic, he evades the second eagle's surprise attack, but the one-eyed eagle didn't expect its partner to fall so fast, prompting its retreat. Ryo reflects that the eagle was the first foe to push him near death multiple times. He had faced death before, but the one-eyed eagle felt different. This marks their third and final encounter. The eagle appears, vastly changed from prior battles. Observing it, Ryo notes it's darker, larger, and cloaked in a black aura. The eagle charges, hurling itself at him, and Ryo barely dodges. Hitting the ground, he recalls it used this move in their first fight. After taking the hit, he's certain it's the same creature, now evolved. The battle rages as Ryo struggles to defend himself, realizing the eagle's immense growth and strength. The eagle shatters his ice armor, and as he tries to repair it, he suddenly can't use magic. The eagle charges again, and Ryo, barely dodging, grows increasingly exhausted. Ryo suspects the eagle might be blocking his magic somehow. The eagle lets out a screech and unleashes a lightning spell across a wide area in front of him. Dodging the lightning, Ryo loses his spear. Spotting a chance, the eagle readies another attack. Ryo draws his new sword, thinking he might channel magic through it. In their final intense clash, their eyes lock, and Ryo swiftly strikes the eagle's weak point, causing it to weaken. Gazing into its good eye, Ryo says he understands its struggle, losing its partner and eye yet fighting fiercely until the end. He acknowledges that their battles helped him grow stronger and thanks the eagle for it. He praises its bravery for showing its evolution and says he's honored to deliver the final blow. Withdrawing his sword from its throat, he seals its fate. The next day, Ryo revisits the battlefield where he fought the one-eyed assassin eagle. Seeing the battle's traces, he feels the victory is real but takes no pride in it. As Ryo stands there, something descends before him, capturing his full attention. A massive dragon lands in front of him. It stands still and communicates telepathically, wondering if this is how it connects with humans. It adds that it hasn't contacted a human in a long time and asks if Ryo can hear it. Still shaken, Ryo begins to hear the dragon's voice in his mind. The dragon, pleased he can hear, confirms it's the one before him. Ryo wonders if this is telepathy, apologizes for his shock, and assures the dragon he can hear it now. When the dragon asks if he's seen a bird evolved from an assassin eagle nearby, Ryo realizes he knows that bird well. He immediately apologizes in case the bird was the dragon's ally. The dragon clarifies it wasn't an acolyte, only that it was curious because the bird's aura vanished from the area. It notes it would make sense if another dragon ate the bird, so it came down the mountain to investigate. With some fear in his eyes, Ryo admits he killed the one-eyed assassin eagle. The dragon, surprised, says it's fine, satisfied with the explanation for the bird's disappearance. It explains the bird was the first in centuries to evolve in the forest and asks if it suppressed Ryo's magic. Ryo quickly confirms it did, saying he could hardly believe he couldn't use his magic, feeling like his mage rights were violated. The dragon seems to notice something about Ryo and remarks he's carrying something unusual. It identifies his sword as the Fairy King's, but Ryo explains he got it from a headless knight at the northern lake. The dragon confirms the knight is the water fairy king who lives in the forest. Ryo mentions he's a water mage and the sword saved him the previous day. The dragon says that's why the king favored him, implying he's getting magic lessons from the king. Ryo swiftly denies taking magic lessons from the water fairy king. Ryo explains he's been training in sword fighting with the water fairy king, never seeing him use magic. The dragon finds it odd that Ryo is learning swordsmanship instead of water magic from the king, but suggests the king must see a need for it. The dragon adds that the water fairy king likely favors Ryo, as both have lived for thousands of years. Seizing the moment, Ryo asks if he can pose some questions, and the dragon agrees. Ryo starts by saying he wants to learn about the Rondo Forest, its size, and what kind of place it is. The dragon reveals that the Rondo Forest, once called the Rondo Subcontinent, is as large as a small continent. It's surrounded by water except to the north, where mountains encircle it. The dragon notes that, to its knowledge, Ryo is the only human in the Rondo subcontinent. Shocked, Ryo realizes he wanted a quiet, isolated life, but not this extreme. The dragon, surprised, says that can't be right. Having lived alone its whole life, the dragon asks where Ryo comes from. Without hesitation, Ryo shares that he was reincarnated from another world and knows others have arrived similarly. Suddenly, a loud roar shakes the air, startling both Ryo and the dragon. The dragon closes its eyes, listening to the roar, while Ryo stands frozen like a statue. The dragon begins to depart, saying it's being summoned but promises they'll meet again. Desperately, Ryo asks for its name, sharing his own. The dragon named Luan warns Ryo to avoid the eastern mountains where dragons may attack freely, then flies off at a terrifying speed, breaking the sound barrier. Ryo watches in awe as Luan soars away at supersonic speed. Overwhelmed, he remarks that dragons are truly powerful. As the dust settles, Luan later reaches the summoning location, thinking Ryo seems unusual and wondering if he's truly human or perhaps an evolved or mutated species. Recalling Ryo's story, Luan notes he's never encountered anything like it, finding the tales intriguing. He muses that even after a long life, there are still unknowns, and he looks forward to watching Ryo further. Observing himself in a water mirror, Ryo notices he hasn't aged a day. Occasionally, his hair grows long, and he trims it, just like his nails, which also grow periodically. While bathing, he observes that his height and face remain unchanged, and plans to fish and collect salt today. He sinks into thought in the warm bathtub during his morning bath. At the beach, Ryo spots scattered wood pieces on the sand, then notices something and runs toward it. Nearing it, he suspects a shipwreck, seeing only 3 people on the sand. Checking the first man, he confirms the man has been dead for some time. From afar, Ryo sees the second man with a piece of wood impaled through his body and realizes he's beyond saving. Then he notices a third man in armor lying on the nearby sand. Approaching, Ryo observes the man's right arm is shattered and bleeding profusely, closely inspecting the wound. He wonders if an artery was struck, given the massive blood loss. Ryo decides that leaving him would mean certain death and resolves to try helping. Focusing on the wound, he concentrates and considers using his water magic. Recalling that the human body is 60% water, he reasons that as a water mage, he can control blood. With intense focus, he locates the hemorrhage's source and works to seal it. Straining, he surrounds the wound with water, halting the bleeding. Though blood still flows initially, it slows, and Ryo feels proud for managing to aid the man. Ryo lifts the armored man from the hot sand and carries him in his arms. Soon, he finds a cart in the wreckage, placing the man inside for easier transport. Later, the man awakens, startled, in an unfamiliar place. Standing, he realizes he's in a large house, wondering if it belongs to a village mayor. He notices something to his right, seeing his sword and armor leaning against the wall. Stepping outside, he spots Ryo with firewood and introduces himself as Abel, asking if Ryo saved him, then thanking him for saving his life. Ryo brushes it off, saying he only brought Abel to his house after finding him on the beach. He adds that he could only save one of the 3 men, and Abel reassures him, revealing they were smugglers. Ryo pauses, turns to Abel, and asks if they were truly smugglers. Ryo suspects Abel might be a smuggler too, since they were together, but doubts it, as Abel doesn't seem like a bad person. Thoughtfully, he notes they're conversing easily, realizing Abel likely isn't speaking Japanese, and credits false Michael for enabling their understanding. Smiling, Ryo introduces himself to Abel and offers food, assuming he's hungry. Still shocked, Abel hears Ryo mention his clothes are likely dry now. Back at the beach, Ryo shows Abel where the other 2 men were, wondering what happened to their bodies. He tells Abel how fortunate he was, while Abel asks him to speak less formally. Ryo explains he speaks formally with elders, but Abel prefers a casual tone, like friends. In a quiet moment, Rio thinks he may have made his first friend in Faye, while Abel ponders if the ship's cargo sank or vanished. Abel muses that the ship's contents might be inside a creature's stomach, and there's nothing he can do now. He thanks Rio but says what he's seeking isn't on the shore anymore. He explains he needs to reach a city to send a message to his friends. Rio, unfamiliar with the city, guesses it's to the north and warns Abel it's a long journey. Rio informs Abel that there are no cities or people nearby, but Abel insists he must make the journey regardless. Turning to Rio, Abel asks if he'd like to join him. After a brief silence with no response, Abel waves his hand in front of Rio's eyes to get his attention. Later, inside Rio's cabin, Abel apologizes for his abruptness, clarifying that it would be a job, with Rio acting as a guide. He adds that he'd pay Rio and assist him if he wanted to explore city life. Sweating, Abel asks for Rio's thoughts. Rio agrees but says he can only leave the next morning, as he has tasks to complete. Abel, delighted, thanks Rio for agreeing to come along. After cleaning the dinner dishes, Rio tells Abel he's stepping out briefly and will return soon. When Abel asks where he's going so late, Rio, exiting the cabin, explains he needs to inform someone he'll be away and asks Abel to wait, as it might take time. As Abel responds, the scene shifts to the headless knight and his horse waiting for Rio. Rio announces he's leaving the forest tomorrow, and this will be their final training until he returns. The knight waits as Rio raises the sword he received, aiming it at the warrior. Rio steels himself, telling the knight he wants this session to be different, urging him to attack with full force. Meanwhile, by candlelight, Abel wonders who Rio went to inform, since no one else lies nearby. He assumes Rio is alone now, perhaps visiting a grave, but decides not to pry. Though Rio doesn't know where the Sea of Luna is, he mentioned it's far north and wonders why he said that. He reflects that traveling alone would be tough, especially not knowing the forest's size. Concluding, Abel notes Rio is a mage without a staff, likely weak in combat, and plans to help him with clothes and more in the city. Exhausted and sweating, Rio's sword is stuck in the ground as he pants from training with the headless knight. He misses a movement from the knight, who extends something to him. Rio wonders what it is, but the proud knight stands silently. Later, Abel says he doesn't want to seem rude, and that Rio doesn't have to answer if he prefers not to. Abel asks where Rio went last night, and Rio explains he informed his master about his upcoming adventure. While donning a new hooded cloak, a farewell gift, Rio shares this with Abel. Abel asks if the cloak has special properties, but Rio admits he doesn't know. The two then set out toward the forest, beginning their journey. Glancing back at his cabin, Rio quietly says goodbye with a stoic expression. They travel north through the morning without meeting monsters, but by mid-afternoon, a small boar crosses their path. Abel swiftly draws his sword and charges, striking the creature precisely. The warrior swiftly attacked the small boar, ending the battle in moments. Astonished, our hero stared at the warrior with wide eyes. Noticing the warrior's uncertainty, Rio clarified that parts of Abel's body glow when he uses combat skills, and his movements shift during them. The warrior then noted that such skills are typical for weapon-wielding warriors. He suggested they focus on finding a suitable campsite as dusk was nearing, mentioning a large tree with a hollow center they had passed, which could serve as a good shelter. They could eat the boar once the camp was set up inside the tree. Abel said he'd rest first but urged our hero to wake him if needed. While Abel rested, Rio sat thoughtfully at the camp, deciding to practice his magic control since he had time. The night grew quieter and deeper as hours passed. Later, Abel awoke and told our hero to rest while he kept watch. While guarding, Abel examined the rabbit our hero had caught, questioning Rio's hunting methods but finding them effective. Observing Rio resting, Abel was certain the boy's cloak wasn't human-made and wondered about his mentor. He considered that Rio's master might be a spirit, but spirits don't give cloaks. It had to be a legendary creature, perhaps a dragon, as the cloak's origin was clearly non-human. Shivering in the cold, Abel dismissed a fleeting thought. Soon, our hero awoke, greeted Abel warmly, and they resumed their journey. Abel led with his sword ready, while Rio trailed, studying the plants around them. Suddenly, something crashed from the sky to Abel's right, startling them both. Abel raised his sword, suspecting an invisible foe or enemy using stealth. Looking up, they saw it was a killer eagle. Our hero warned Abel that the creature used air magic for long-range attacks. The warrior proposed retreating, but Rio revealed a boar was chasing them, and another unknown beast lay ahead, making escape impossible. They wondered if they'd stumbled into a trap, but our hero insisted it was mere chance, noting the open field was the eagle's hunting ground. Rio suggested they fight in the clearing, offering to handle the killer eagle while Abel dealt with the boar. Concerned, Abel cautioned that the eagle's aerial strikes could kill even a seasoned warrior if he wasn't careful. Our hero, an ice mage, said defense was his strength and noted warriors struggle with flying enemies. Abel agreed, stepped forward, and readied for battle. As he charged, he shouted to Ryo that he'd return after defeating the boar, urging him to stay alive. Our hero advised Abel to stay calm to avoid injury. Abel then rushed toward the boar, puzzled by how Ryo sensed the creature from so far. The boar summoned nearby rocks, unleashing a magical stone barrage on Abel. Using a combat skill, Abel deftly dodged each attack. When close enough, he struck the boar with his sword, then withdrew the blade from the fallen creature. Exhausted, he knelt, planting his sword in the ground and panting heavily. He realized he'd overused his skills too quickly, and fatigue was overwhelming him. Still, he knew he had to recover fast to aid Ryo. Hoisting the boar's body, he hurried back to where Ryo faced the killer eagle. Abel gazed at the fallen killer eagle, with Ryo grinning beside the defeated creature. Shocked, the warrior stared at Ryo and questioned if he truly vanquished the beast. Beaming, Ryo confirmed he did, and added that the other monsters ahead had fled. Abel sank to his knees, amazed as Ryo asked if he was injured. Surveying Ryo's battle scene, Abel assured he was unharmed, just weary. He quickly asked how Ryo evaded the killer eagle's strikes. He remarked that dodging invisible air magic attacks by sight alone is nearly impossible. Meanwhile, Ryo, curious, requested Abel to turn and face him. Abel turned toward Ryo. The warrior then felt and touched a faint ice wall. Ryo explained the barrier was nearly imperceptible, and Abel agreed it was almost invisible. Abel realized the killer eagle had essentially defeated itself by crashing into the nearly unseen ice wall. He mentioned knowing many air, fire, and earth mages, but recalled an old man saying water mages don't fight, a claim he now knew was wrong. Grinning, Ryo asked Abel what he meant. Abel quickly said it was nothing, just muttering to himself. Both then looked toward the mountain, hearing eerie noises. They agreed to choose either the left or right path to exit the mountain range. Abel admitted both routes felt ominous, so he pulled out a coin, proposing they let fate decide. Heads meant left, tails meant right. Before Ryo could respond, Abel flipped the coin. It landed in Abel's hand, showing heads, so they chose the left path. Abel noticed Ryo acting oddly and asked if something was wrong with the coin. Ryo admitted he'd never seen money before. Ryo asked to examine the coin closer, and Abel agreed. Abel explained the coin-based economy of their world, and Ryo likened it to 19th century Earth, asking how many nations existed. Recalling from memory, Abel listed 3 major realms: the Kingdom of Nightly, the Empire of We, and the Federation of Handle. While talking, Abel sensed something odd nearby. He warned they were in a stone golem nest, and Ryo remarked he didn't know golems had nests. Abel clarified that a nest is just a term for a place with many golems, and Ryo questioned if golems shouldn't have human-like limbs. After counting, Abel noted there were 12 golems and fleeing wasn't wise. Ryo asked Abel if he could try a new magic attack, and Abel consented. Ryo extended his hand, concentrating on his spell. Suddenly, 10 massive ice walls crashed down on all the golems, sounding like an earthquake. With a playful smirk, Ryo quipped that this was a weapon of mass destruction. They cleared the area and spotted a large dark yellow magic stone. It was noted that such stone's value depends on size and color. Ryo called the stone nice battle loot and told Abel he could keep it. Abel, somewhat skeptical, agreed to keep the magic stone prize. Meanwhile, Ryo realized his method for defeating the golems didn't work as planned. Abel admitted that without Ryo, they might have perished, adding he didn't even know about collecting magic stones, which Ryo acknowledged. After some time, Ryo spotted something to his right and asked Abel what it was. Ryo noted it resembled a massive hippopotamus. Abel identified it as a behemoth, and Ryo jokingly asked if they should hunt it. Ryo calculated that the behemoth was too large, even for his 10 ice walls, and Abel agreed, warning him not to attempt anything against it. Ryo grew serious, asking Abel if he thought he was crazy. Abel promptly said yes. Then Ryo noticed something far off. He saw objects flying toward them and thought they might be dragons. As they neared, both realized they were wyverns, not dragons. They soon saw the wyverns weren't aiming for them. The wyverns were targeting the behemoth. Ryo, thrilled, said he'd finally see a beast fight. He noted the behemoth was outnumbered, with 6 wyverns attacking. One wyvern screeched, launching a sharp wind gust at the behemoth. Both heroes, stunned by the winged creature's attack, wondered how the behemoth would respond. Motionless, the behemoth used stone magic to summon huge boulders around itself as a shield. The wyvern's wind attack struck one of the summoned rocks, which blocked it completely. The flying creatures unleashed another round of wind attacks. The behemoth remained unharmed behind its stone barrier. The behemoth then conjured massive stone walls for protection. Both the heroes and wyverns gaped, amazed at the towering barriers around the giant beast. Abel said he knew of behemoths, but not their magic use. Rio expected a fight, not a magical one. The wyverns circled the walls, and with a fierce roar, the behemoth shattered its barriers, glaring at the wyverns. Suddenly, the wyverns and heroes noticed something odd. The wyverns lost their flight ability, crashing around the behemoth. Abel asked Rio if the beast somehow paralyzed them, but Rio doubted it. The behemoth roared again, shaking the ground as the wyverns writhed helplessly. Rio, recognizing the phenomenon, suggested it was magic nullification. Abel, shocked, asked if that was possible, noting no human he knew could do it, let alone a monster. Rio urged him to look closer. He pointed out the wyverns were struggling to rise but couldn't, unlike paralysis where movement would be impossible. Abel struggled to believe his eyes but recalled hearing of such traps in dungeons. Rio grew excited at the mention of dungeons, asking if the Kingdom of Mighty had anti-magic rooms. Abel clarified the dungeons were in the western province, not the kingdom, as the behemoth stomped over the grounded wyverns. Abel asked Rio if he was interested in dungeons, and Rio eagerly said yes. As the behemoth finished off the wyverns, Abel noted Rio was fortunate since Loon had the only dungeon in the central provinces. Rio remarked that Abel should have mentioned it sooner, but Abel countered that he didn't know Rio was so keen on dungeons. They walked away, discussing the terrifying beast battle and imagining a fight between Abel and the behemoth. They observed a wyvern eating a boar and set a trap. Rio raised his arms, focusing his magic, and huge ice spikes rained from the sky, striking the wyvern and pinning it down as Abel swiftly approached its head. While chatting, Rio suggested hunting animals since their food was running low. A small ice arrow struck a rabbit, pinning it to the mountain. They began ambushing other scattered wyverns. After defeating another, Rio felt hunting them was getting easier, and Abel admitted he was still amazed at how simple it seemed. Rio sliced the meat, saying he just needed to dry it before they moved on. He suggested they could take a nearby path, but Abel, cautious, warned him to stay alert. Right after Abel spoke, they both looked left and saw a giant griffin-like beast staring at them. They noticed the griffin was focused on the rabbit meat tied to Rio's waist. Rio tossed a piece to the beast, which ate it eagerly. Rio remarked it seemed starving. The cheerful griffin bounced, and Abel also threw it a rabbit from his belt. The beast grabbed the food and flew off. Rio pointed out a road behind where the griffin had been. Abel spotted a signpost and confirmed it was a path, urging Rio to follow it. The mountains south of the central province were known as impassable, even for adventurers. Long ago, the path had another name, now forgotten. Now called the Evil Mountains due to its orc and ogre infestations, the range was notorious. Abel sighed in relief, grateful they survived the mountains on their way to civilization. Rio asked if Abel was a ranked adventurer. Abel confirmed, curious why Rio asked. Rio expressed uncertainty about joining an adventurer's guild, and Abel explained it exempted him from tolls and city taxes. Abel added that a guild card acted as identification, granting free city entry and better market prices. Rio said that was exactly what he wanted to hear. Abel noted the guild stored adventurers' belongings and earnings, explaining it was too risky to carry all their wealth. Stunned, Rio likened guilds to banks. In a city with tall buildings, he held a pamphlet and a pouch, recalling questions he asked Abel, like whether he could withdraw money from other guild branches. Abel said his knowledge covered only the central provinces, but noted the guild was an independent entity in every nation. Abel explained that during wars, nations could hire the guild and adventurers as mercenaries. Rio thought this was cheaper than sending armies. Abel said adventurers could accept or decline such tasks. He admitted fearing an enemy taking all he owned, leaving him no choice but to fight. Rio, frustrated, questioned how governments could let the guild hold their money hostage. Pointing ahead, he noted a city in the distance. Abel was nearly sure it was the city of Calamity, meaning they'd entered the kingdom of Nightly. He explained that Kalidi was the kingdom's southeasternmost city, and a day's walk northeast would bring them to Loon, Abel's final stop. Abel advised Rio to register as an adventurer in Loon, not Calamity, prompting Rio to ask why. Abel explained that Loon, the kingdom's largest border city, drew diverse people due to its unique dungeon. He added that if Rio made Loon his base, he'd feel more settled, as cities often gave local adventurers better perks. Rio agreed it made sense, but noted he lacked a card for entry. Abel said it wasn't an issue since, as a B-rank adventurer, he could sponsor Rio for just 1 silver coin. Rio expressed his deep respect for Abel, rested his hands. Abel said it was fine and suggested they spend a night in Kalidi, where Rio could try local food. At a restaurant, Rio savored what seemed like curry with rice, amazed by its taste. He kept ordering more curry and dishes, eating heartily all night while exploring the city. Rio asked Abel if Loon had curry too, and Abel confirmed it was common in the kingdom's southern region. Rio vowed to recreate the curry when he returned to the forest of Rondo. The next day, strolling through the city, Rio asked Abel if people lived outside it. Abel confirmed that farmers often did, though they once lived inside. He noted Loon kept its gates open at night, unlike Kalidi, which had fewer patrols, leading Rio to question Loon's safety. Abel believed Loon's history and size ensured its security. At Loon's gates, a guard greeted Abel by name but said his companion needed to pay a fee, which Abel offered to cover. He searched his pouch for the correct amount to hand over. Abel suggested they head straight to the guild and asked if Rio was sure about registering. Rio affirmed he wanted to try the adventurer's life. Abel noted that with him, Rio could apply for a rank up, explaining that adventurers typically began at F rank but could start at E or D with a B rank or higher sponsor. Rio asked about the benefits of D rank. Abel explained it offered better missions and higher rewards. Rio inquired if wyvern magic stones were valuable, and Abel said they were extremely so, as wyverns were tough to defeat. He added their rarity made them nearly priceless, and selling Rio's stash could disrupt the market. At the Adventurers Guild, Abel reassured Rio that the guild could handle such matters, so he shouldn't worry. Upon entering, a young woman asked if Abel was really there, while a man expressed shock at seeing him. A large warrior behind her was stunned to see Abel alive. The narrator revealed that B-rank adventurers were rare, and Abel led the Crimson Sword group. Abel's group, the Crimson Sword, consisted of Rhea the Priestess, Warren the Shield-Bearer, and Lynn the Mage. Rio paused, realizing that befriending Abel could be highly beneficial, given how much everyone admired him. Abel placed his hands on Rio's shoulders, introducing him to the group as the one who saved his life, enabling him to return safely. Abel announced that Rio would register as an adventurer and join their group. He asked everyone to treat the new member kindly. The group greeted Rio with warm smiles. Rio introduced himself, expressing joy at meeting them all. One man thanked Rio for saving Abel, while another hoped to get to know him better. Abel asked a woman named Nine if she could process Rio's registration, as he wanted to recommend him for D rank. Nine said she could handle it but needed proof of Rio's worthiness for D rank. Abel, anticipating this, asked if they could meet the guild master now, and Nine believed it was possible. As they walked, Nine mentioned the guild master had been stuck in his office with paperwork all day and was grumpy. She said she'd inform him of their arrival and asked them to wait in the lounge. Abel relaxed on a sofa, while Rio stood, awaiting their summons. Suddenly, a loud voice shouted, demanding to know what was being said. Heavy footsteps approached, and a man entered the lounge, kneeling in relief upon seeing Abel. Abel apologized for causing worry but assured he was alive. The guild master admitted he'd lost hope when Abel went missing. Composing himself, he asked about the mage, and Abel pointed to Rio, crediting him with his survival. The man introduced himself as Human Glass, Loon's guild master, and thanked Rio for saving Abel. Rio brushed it off, saying he just happened to meet the warrior by chance. Abel told the guild master that Rio wanted to join the guild and that he wished to recommend him for a rank increase. The guild master noted that Abel's recommendation would need verification. Nine added that this was precisely why Abel wanted to meet the guild master. She excused herself, saying she'd be at the front desk if needed. As she left, the guild master settled into an armchair, saying he needed to ask a few questions first. Abel stepped forward, claiming Rio was stronger than him. Rio questioned if Abel had to say something so extreme. The guild master was visibly impressed by Abel's words. Abel continued, describing Rio as a clown but serious about work, and displayed the magic stones they'd collected from defeated monsters on the table. Abel showed off the stone's size and color to everyone. The guild master, surprised, identified them as attribute magic stones due to their green hue, holding back further comment. He noted their large size and dark color, asking if they came from wyverns. Abel confirmed, adding that Rio had just as many stones as he did. Still shocked, the guild master questioned how they encountered so many wyverns near the city, noting it would take everyone to fend off such an attack. Abel calmed him, explaining they hunted them south of the Evil Mountains. The master asked why they were there, and Abel recounted how their ship wrecked, leaving them on a landmass where they trekked to the mountains and found a wyvern nest. The guild master inquired if Abel planned to use his contacts to sell the stones without crashing the market, and Abel shyly confirmed. He said he could sell to various buyers, including royals, and secure the funds in 2 or 3 days. He suggested splitting profits evenly, but Abel insisted on taking 40% and giving Rio 60%. Rio argued for an even split, but Abel stressed he owed Rio for saving his life and ensuring his safe return. Rio tried to object, but the guild master warned him not to dishonor Abel by refusing the split. Reluctantly, Rio agreed to the terms, taking 60% and leaving 40% for Abel. At the reception desk, Nine spoke to someone distracted, asking them to wait. In the hallway, the receptionist yelled for someone to stop, as matters were unresolved. Rio noticed something odd outside the hall's door. A girl entered, stunned, her legs buckling as she cried upon seeing Abel alive. Smiling, Abel apologized to Lin for causing her worry. A priestess and a tall warrior then entered, and Abel greeted them, announcing his return. The priestess, emotional, welcomed him back. The guild master stood, saying they had much to discuss, and told Nine and Rio the paperwork was in his office. In the office, the guild master asked Rio to sit and requested Nine fetch the papers to register Rio as an adventurer. Rio, hesitant, asked if he could really be D rank, and the master assured him it was fine. He asked who wouldn't be convinced by the magic stones they brought. Rio, embarrassed, noted Abel dealt the final blows, not him. The guild master acknowledged Abel's skill but said no warrior, however talented, could defeat a wyvern alone, meaning Rio's strength created the openings for Abel's victories. Thus, Rio was certainly worthy of D rank. The guild master gave Rio a playful punch, surprised at his fitness for a mage. Rio explained he trained physically for hunting alone, in case he ran out of magic or needed to flee. The guild master understood, wishing more young people thought that way. Soon, a knock came at the office door, and the guild master invited the visitor in. Nine entered with a crystal ball-like tool, saying it was for registration. He thanked her, assigning her the paperwork, and told Rio to follow Nine's instructions for a smooth process. Nine formally introduced herself to Rio as a worker at Loon's Adventurers Guild. Rio said it was a pleasure to meet her and thanked her for her kindness. Sitting opposite him, Nine said she needed basic details and asked Rio to answer some questions. She requested his name, occupation, and occupation attribute, which Rio answered correctly, except for the question about his residence. Feeling shy, Rio admitted he didn't have a residence yet, having just arrived in Loon. Nine explained that he could stay in the guild's dormitory for up to 300 days after registering, giving him ample time to settle. She added that the dorms helped new adventurers connect. Rio could leave any time within those 300 days if he chose. Taking the paper Nine gave him, Rio marveled at Faye's mysteries, noting the absence of printers yet the impressive quality and volume of copies. Nine asked if Rio had ever explored a dungeon, and he said no. She informed him about the guild's monthly dungeon seminar and various free courses and seminars for novice adventurers. Nine suggested the dungeon seminar, and Rio, thrilled, eagerly agreed to attend. Smiling at his excitement, Nine said the seminar started the day after tomorrow. She explained it spanned 5 days, each covering a different topic, and urged him to attend all sessions. She offered to complete his form and instructed him to be on the guild hall's 3rd floor at 9 in the morning. Rio wondered if Fee's time measurement matched Earth's. Nine told him to check the plaza's tower, which rang at set times, including 9 in the morning, confirming time was the same as on Earth. She announced the interview was done, and only registration remained, prompting Rio to ask what she meant. Nine pointed to the crystal ball and asked Rio to place his hand on it. He did, and a voice confirmed his registration. Nine, smiling, told him to remove his hand and thanked him. She then handed him his guild ID card, warning that replacing a damaged or lost card cost 1 gold coin, and Rio thanked her. Reading the card, Rio wondered if it could earn points. Moments later, an adventurer party entered the guild master's office, all smiling. Abel thanked the master for letting them use the lounge and said they were leaving. Lin announced a party at 6 in the evening at the Golden Wave to celebrate Abel's return, inviting Nine and Rio. Abel told Rio he had to attend, being the guest of honor. Confused, Rio glanced at the group. Abel clarified that the Golden Wave was their usual inn, and he'd book Rio a room so he could drink freely. Abel insisted Rio couldn't refuse the invitation. A voice confirmed the registration was complete and asked if Rio had questions. Abel, eager, offered to answer anything and urged Rio to head out. The priestess said she'd prepare at the inn, while Abel jokingly told the guild master he was taking Rio. Rio thanked Nine and the guild master for their help. Nine declared him an official Loon adventurer and said she'd return to the reception desk as he thanked her again. After everyone left, the guild master knelt, exclaiming he was overjoyed and could cry. He reflected on how chaotic things became when Abel went missing and gave thanks for his safe return. The guildmaster, still in disbelief, reflected on Abel surviving the evil mountains after a shipwreck, considering how awful it must have been. He decided Abel no longer needed to probe the smuggling ring and vowed to avoid assigning him water or sea-related missions. In his mind, he thanked Rio again for bringing Abel back alive, unsure what he'd have done otherwise. Approaching a book-filled cabinet, the guildmaster thought he should notify someone of Abel's safety. He picked up a telephone-like device from the shelf. Meanwhile, Rio and Abel strolled through Loon's streets, with Abel promising to reward Rio for saving him by buying him clothes and a staff. Abel noted Rio might like his leather outfit and sandals, but assured he'd choose clothes close to his style. Rio said Abel didn't need to be cautious, as he knew a leather loincloth wasn't city-appropriate. He wasn't attached to his forest scavenged clothes and would gladly wear whatever Abel provided. Relieved, Abel told Rio he could select casual and fancier clothes. As they walked, Rio asked why he'd need a staff while shopping for clothes, questioning if mages required one. From the fitting room, Rio explained he didn't need a staff to use magic. Abel mentioned that staffs boost magical power and wondered how strong Rio could be with one. Still dressing, Rio said he'd never use a staff and relied on his sword for close combat. Surprised, Abel asked if Rio actually knew swordplay or if he meant the mashit he carried, not a true sword. Rio wondered if he hadn't already discussed this with Abel. He recalled mentioning as a wind mage, he'd charge enemies, implying sword use. Leaving the shop, Abel asked again if Rio wanted a staff, and Rio confirmed he didn't need one. Rio added he wouldn't know how to use a staff and already had his sword. Abel agreed but noted Rio's weapon wasn't a proper sword. Confused, Rio showed his blade, insisting it was a sword. Abel questioned if Rio really called it a sword, having thought it was just a dagger. Rio said the real issue was his lack of world knowledge. Abel asked why, and Rio admitted he didn't know basics like measurements or a day's length. Abel remarked he always found Rio odd, but hadn't realized he lacked everyday knowledge. Rio quoted that knowing you know nothing shows wisdom. He said admitting ignorance was wise, and Abel began explaining the world's basics, advising Rio not to memorize everything at once. Rio absorbed it all, leading Abel to wonder if the boy was a genius. Abel suggested they move on, as they'd reached the Golden Wave Tavern, warning Rio he wasn't ready to drink. The next morning in Loon, Rio awoke hungover, head throbbing, recalling that someone carried him to his room the previous night. Rio's hangover and hazy memories explained his rough state from the previous night. In the tavern, scenes showed people raising mugs, joyfully celebrating Abel's safe return. Rio and Abel drank and chuckled, praising the tasty drinks and perfect food. Climbing the stairs, Rio recalled an old poem about tall grass enduring through the dreams of mighty warriors. Sitting in the tavern's common room, Rio, still hungover, lowered his head. A woman named Lenny passed by, wished him good morning, and said breakfast would be ready soon, inviting him to sit anywhere. Rio thanked her and approached to ask another question. He inquired about the previous night's bill, mentioning his move to the guild's lodging, but Lenny assured him Abel had covered everything. Surprised, Rio thought about Abel's generosity, believing anyone who paid for others was exceptional. Soon after, he visited the Adventurers Guild headquarters and told Nine he wanted to follow up on the lodging offer. Nine greeted him warmly and asked how she could assist, as Rio expressed interest in learning more about the guild's dormitory. Nine explained that 30 people currently stayed there, though some were at the dungeon and not everyone went daily, so the place remained lively. She noted each room housed 6 people, with a shared common area for all. With no one else waiting, she offered to show him around. As they walked, she hoped he enjoyed the party, noting everyone left in high spirits. Rio admitted he overdrank, and Nine suggested a detox potion from the guild shop to cure his hangover, surprising Rio, who didn't know potions could do that. He asked about lodging rules, and Nine said residents could come and go freely, with access to rooms, shared bathrooms, and a kitchen. Nine added there were no caretakers among residents, and everyone managed themselves. Impressed, Rio asked if caretakers ever existed, and Nine said yes, calling it a long story. Now only cleaning was outsourced. She mentioned a former adventurer ran a cleaning business in Loon, and Rio remarked that must be what adventurers do after retiring. Nine told Rio he'd share room 10 with Nils and Ito, who were at the dungeon. At room 10, Nine pointed to the door's nameplates, saying his was ready and she'd hang it. Hesitant but agreeing, Rio watched as Nine placed his nameplate by the door. 3 nameplates hung on the door for the room's occupants, with space for 2 more. A knock came from downstairs, and someone allowed entry. Nine looked out, confirming both were there. She left the room with Rio, smiling as she introduced herself as the guild receptionist, announcing Nils and Ito were back. A boy without upper garment, embarrassed, greeted Nine, who returned the hello. 9 said the timing was perfect. As she was about to introduce Rio, she asked them to look after him, and Rio introduced himself. The girl seemed less enthusiastic about a new roommate. The boy quickly introduced himself as Nils and gestured to the girl, saying she was Ido, both expressing pleasure in meeting Rio. 9 said she'd head back to the reception desk and reminded Rio not to be late for the next day's seminar, noting it'd be easy since he'd rest there. As 9 left, Nils put on a shirt while Ido gave him a stern look, still not dressed. Nils remarked that Miss 9 was stunning. Ido told him to relax, pointing out that everyone adored the receptionists, but he had no chance. Offended, Nils said every man dreamed of marrying one after gaining fame. Ido countered that those women were meant for nobles, not common adventurers. Meanwhile, Ido told Rio they could be informal as roommates. Ido admitted she'd been anxious about who joined their room, as a new person was inevitable, and was relieved it was Rio. Nils agreed, saying he hates sharing with someone like Dan from room 1. Rio, a bit uneasy, noted that clashing personalities could cause issues. Nils explained he was a swordsman and Ido a priestess, then asked about Rio, guessing he was a mage. Looking at Nils, Rio confirmed he was a mage. Nils mentioned hearing 9 discuss the seminar and asked if Rio would attend, to which Rio replied he'd go for all 5 days. Nils said the seminar saved his life. Later, a knock came at room 10's door, and 9 entered with a new registrant who'd stay in the dorm. The boy introduced himself as a man. Nils stepped forward, introducing himself and saying the others were Rio and Ido. 9 told them a man would attend the seminar too, suggesting he and Rio go together, then said goodbye and left. Nils, captivated, commented on 9's beauty. Ido, eyeing a man, noted he looked young and asked if he was an adult. A man admitted he was 16 but became an adventurer to survive after his family died. Nils said they were all in similar situations and thought it was great that a man and Rio were in the same seminar. Rio told a man they'd learn a lot over the 5 days, while Nils and Ido said they were returning to the dungeon, wishing them luck with the seminar. Elsewhere, Lin yelled at Abel, insisting something was impossible. Abel responded that he hated delivering bad news, but it was possible. Lin said she knew the ice wall spell but claimed casting it midair to drop on enemies was impossible. She argued no element could create magic effects at a distance, only around the caster. Lin's 2 companions said she was overreacting and trusted Abel's account. Lin turned to one, insisting her logic was sound and accusing her of siding with Abel out of affection. Rhea agreed that even light mages could only heal nearby allies, noting how useful distant healing would be. Abel insisted he was just describing what happened, explaining how they got the yellow magic stone from the golem. His companions, eyeing the stone, asked what he planned to do with such a large one. Abel said he could sell it, but splitting profits would get tricky if he mentioned Rio, complicating matters. He added that Rio's registration in Lune didn't mean he was loyal to the kingdom of Knightly, as others might try to recruit him for their realms. Lin agreed, saying if even half of Abel's claims about Rio were true, he was extraordinary. Abel grew frustrated, realizing his friends doubted his credibility. Still, Abel noted Rio might leave Lune for another city. Rhea said that would make Lune, and thus the kingdom of Knightly, lose a key asset. She added it'd be disastrous if Rio joined the Empire, but Abel said Rio wouldn't, as the Empire didn't suit him. Rhea asked what he meant, and Lin noted the Empire was the kingdom's only rival. Abel explained Rio thought the Empire's name wasn't cool, so he disliked it and would never go there. Confused, Rhea shifted topics, saying they only took regular missions they couldn't refuse since they avoided the dungeon. Abel thanked his friends sincerely for their efforts. Rhea said she was thrilled he returned safely, and they split rewards 4 ways, urging him to check his share later. Surprised, Abel told his friends to hold on, realizing what Rhea meant. He argued it wasn't fair to include him since he was absent, suggesting a 3-way split. His friends refused, saying that's how their group operated. Abel recalled he also earned money and couldn't carry all the magic stones from monsters defeated en route. Abel said he gave the magic stones to the guild master to sell, planning to split the profits with his friends. Stunned, they asked how he acquired so many stones. Lin wondered if Abel aided another group. Abel denied it, reminding her he mentioned wyverns south of the Evil Mountains, which they defeated to reach Lune, as leaving them was too risky. Lin, still shocked, clarified that Abel and Rio defeated the wyverns, and Abel confirmed. He described Rio hurling ice spears at their wings while he struck their eyes after they fell. Lin struggled to comprehend Rio targeting the wyvern's wings with ice spears. Rhea noted wyverns used air barriers around themselves, and Abel confirmed they did, affirming their tactic worked. Lin said even Master Hilarion couldn't wield such strong magic, and Rhea agreed, saying she only knew one person whose magic might compare. Abel mentioned the Inferno Mage from the Empire, a legendary figure said to have incinerated 1,000 kingdom soldiers in one strike. Stories claimed he defeated a wyvern with a single blow and crushed a rebel force barricaded in a city. Grinning, Abel said he'd never want to face the Inferno Mage in battle. More seriously, Abel added he wouldn't want to fight Rio either. He recalled Rio casting magic without chance, using made-up, cool-sounding names that matched his personality. Combined with his silent, rapid spells, Rio's abilities were formidable. Abel admitted that facing Rio's ice wall, he wasn't sure he could break through, even at full strength with his impalement strike. Rio could also launch ice spears from behind the wall, and Abel couldn't think of any strategy to win, especially after what Rio said upon reaching Lune. He remembered Rio striking a pose with his sword, claiming he could fight up close. Exhausted by the thought, Abel said it wasn't amusing. He couldn't imagine beating Rio, even with magic. Rio's close combat skills made him an anomaly, alongside the Empire's Hell Mage. Abel concluded that making an enemy of a mage was a bad idea. On the 5th day of the Beginner Dungeon seminar, someone prompted Rio to ask his question. Rio thanked them and asked if any teleportation device allowed returning to the last dungeon floor cleared. Everyone stared, stunned, as Rio stood with his mouth open. The instructor praised Rio's knowledge, confirming some dungeons had such mechanisms. He explained that Lune's dungeon lacked this feature, but in others, exploration resumed where it stopped. He admitted he didn't know the technical details, and Rio thanked him, saying it was fine. After the seminar, a man walked ahead of Rio looking grumpy. Rio thought he was right to guess Lune's dungeon lacked the teleportation feature, feeling satisfied. A man, impressed, said so, but Rio, a bit shy, downplayed it as a minor curiosity. Suddenly, the gates clanged loudly as they opened, revealing a fortified room with iron bars. The instructor had explained that monster breakouts occurred every few years, so the bars prevented escapes into the city. He described the double gates, noting that names, dates, and entry times were logged, and those who didn't return were deemed missing. The instructor confirmed he'd recorded all students' names and entry times, officially marking their entry. Rio noticed something strange nearby and saw Aman trembling. He told Aman to relax, seeing his nervousness. Rio stepped closer, advising deep breaths, and Aman said he felt slightly better after complying. Though Aman still looked pale, Rio reassured him that everything would be okay since they were all together. They passed through the gates, descending a dark staircase into the dungeon. Aman swallowed hard and began the descent. Upon reaching the first floor, someone remarked that the place was massive. The instructor explained that only weak monsters roamed the first floor, allowing safe exploration, but failing to return within 2 hours meant being marked as missing and temporarily banned from re-entering. Side by side, Rio and Aman advanced, weapons drawn. Suddenly, Rio sensed a presence, while Aman grew frantic with panic. Rio calmly said the target was a minute away, planning to freeze it with ice magic so Aman could attack with his sword. He assured Aman they'd be fine if they stopped the creature before it struck. Moving deeper into the dim cave, they heard a noise. A soldier ant appeared, which Rio recognized from a book. The beast charged but stopped before the heroes. Rio noted it didn't spit acid, so the best tactic was to flank and behead it. Aman nodded, understanding, and prepared to move to the side. Glancing at Rio, Aman vowed to do his best. Rio began casting his ice magic, announcing the attack start. He extended his hand, chanting his spell. Water bubbles formed above the soldier ant, and as Rio summoned ice to strike, countless ice spears rained down, pinning the creature to the ground. Simultaneously, Rio yelled for Aman to flank and decapitate the ant. Aman agreed, swiftly dashing to the creature's side. With a quick strike, the swordsman sliced off the ant's head. Rio raised his arms in victory, celebrating, while Aman stood, bewildered by what just happened. Aman stared, stunned, at the defeated soldier ant, shouting to Rio that he did it. Rio praised him, saying he performed excellently. Approaching Aman, Rio suggested taking the ant's magic stone to mark Aman's first dungeon victory. Aman, incredulous, asked if Rio was sure, and Rio confirmed, explaining that adventurers earned rewards this way in dungeons. Aman said he'd remember that and asked if they should return to the meeting point. Rio explained that slugs would eat the defeated beasts, cleaning the dungeon, and believed success built confidence. Both raised their fists, celebrating their victory over the soldier ant on their first dungeon run. Aman noted he only landed the final blow because Rio immobilized the beast. Rio praised Aman's swordsmanship, urging him not to be so humble. Nils interjected, saying it didn't matter who did what, celebration was key. After eating and drinking, Ito and Nils said their team would explore the dungeon for the next 2 days and asked about the boys' plans. Amun said he wanted to keep exploring and would seek parties to join, wondering if finding willing teammates was easy. He seemed daunted by teaming up with strangers, while Rio quietly pondered something. Then Rio turned to Aman, asking if he'd like to form a party to explore up to the dungeon's 3rd floor. Thrilled, Aman eagerly agreed to team up with Rio, curious why ants appeared on the 1st floor, typically home to bats. Nils mentioned encountering ants there before. Ado recalled that the guild had received reports of ants on the 1st floor over the past 6 months. Reports confirmed ants on the dungeon's 1st and 2nd floors. Nils wondered why this was happening. Ado recalled it happened to them before, noting the dungeon remained unmapped. Abel approached the table where the group chatted, explaining that ants appeared because they dug tunnels, allowing easier movement between floors. Rio teased Abel, saying it wasn't nice for a veteran to trick newcomers. Abel insisted he was just answering honestly. He asked if the group were Rio's roommates, introducing himself and joking that Rio was strong but had personality quirks. Rio retorted that if Abel was trying to rile him with such nonsense, he'd take the bait, while Nils wondered if Abel's name sounded familiar. Nils suddenly recalled Abel was the Crimson Sword, stood and introduced himself as a swordsman, eagerly requesting a handshake. Abel agreed, encouraging Nils to strive hard but prioritize survival, then shook his hand. Rio, observing, thought how effortlessly Abel shared wisdom, shaking hands with others, and pondered if that was why he was so well liked. Abel mentioned his last mission kept him away, and he'd only recently returned. Lynn spotted Abel, yelling that she found where he was hiding. Ria reminded him they needed to report to the guild master. Annoyed, Abel said he wasn't hiding, just aiding the newcomers. Lynn apologized to Rio, saying she needed to take Abel, and asked Warren to grab him. Warren reached for Abel, but Abel snapped he could walk himself. Lynn apologized again, saying they had guild business, and Rio said it was okay. In the background, Warren seized Abel, dragging him off. Abel shouted that Rio was a traitor and told Warren to stop ignoring him and let him go. Everyone at the table gaped at the chaotic scene, while Rio watched, smiling. A man called it a great show. Nils, eyes gleaming, exclaimed how amazing Abel was. In Loon's dungeon, the 1st floor's double security bars were visible. Descending to the 2nd floor, torches lit the walls. Rio commanded his ice spears to strike, pinning beasts to the ground from below. A man readied his sword to attack the immobilized creatures. He brought his torch closer to the defeated beasts as Rio trailed behind. Rio praised Aman's excellent work, and Aman thanked him. Rio proposed an idea for the next fight, suggesting Aman face a beast alone. He said an unharmed opponent was tougher, and he'd only injure the wolf's front legs. Aman agreed to the plan. Aman asked Rio if he was certain about this. Rio wondered why. Aman expressed gratitude for training with Rio, but asked if it was enough for him. Rio told him not to worry, noting Aman's fighting style resembled Abel's. He asked if Aman learned from someone in his village. Surprised by the comparison, Aman said yes. Aman explained he trained under a former adventurer in his village, calling him Grandpa Akira, who studied at a renowned martial arts school and worked hard on his farm. He apologized, saying that's all he recalled. Rio said deep fundamentals build strength, like with Abel. As they navigated the dungeon's 2nd floor, a man asked how Rio, a mage, knew so much about martial arts. Recalling his training with a legendary mentor, Rio said his teacher guided him, though he had his own approach, so his knowledge was limited. A man marveled that Rio could be both a swordsman and mage, then noticed Rio didn't always carry a sword. Rio drew his blade, showing it to a man. The swordsman was amazed to see it glowing faintly in the dungeon's dim light. He asked about it, and Rio explained his master gave it to him, a sword crafted for water magic users. Examining the blade, a man realized it was made of ice, noting only a water mage could wield it. He said he'd never seen anything like it. Spotting 2 smaller wolves approaching, a man readied for combat. The wolves sensed them and charged toward the pair. Rio said he'd wound one wolf's hind legs, allowing a man to strike. He cast a water jet and 2 small ice spears at the wolves. One wolf was hit by the jet, while the other took spears to its hind legs. The wolves leaped back, recovering, but the injured one, bleeding and panting, glared at Aman. Aman locked eyes with the wounded wolf, advancing in a fighting stance. Rio watched closely as they faced off. He noted Aman's style left no openings but worried about his endurance. Rio thought stamina could be improved with training, something Aman could develop. Rio realized he hadn't practiced running while focusing on magic since leaving the Rondo forest. Panting, Aman announced he'd defeated the wolf, and Rio, smiling, congratulated him. Rio then conjured an omnidirectional ice barrier from floor to ceiling to protect them. He explained the ice barrier was tough for beasts to break, so they could rest. A man collapsed, breathing heavily, relieved. Ryo advised him not to rush or overexert and offered water. More relaxed, a man remarked the barrier was so thin it was nearly transparent. Ryo explained that impurities in water and air made ice cloudy, as people expected. He said pure water could create clear ice without magic, but this barrier used magic. A man praised water magic's wonders, while Ryo thought he was helping elevate Water Mage's reputation. A man admitted he hadn't expected fighting moving opponents to be so tiring, and Ryo asked if he'd fought beasts before. A man said he'd only battled monsters in groups, with multiple humans against one creature. Ryo said solo fights were far more stressful than group battles. Ryo noted a man's fighting style drained him quickly. He suggested refining his technique to reduce injury and emphasize training stamina. He recommended running to boost endurance and practicing strikes to strengthen arms and shoulders. Hammond explains that his master instructed him to practice specific exercises and stances daily. Ryo responds that consistent discipline in following these routines will lead to significant improvement. He shares that he journeyed with Abel for a long time, noting that despite Abel's natural talent, he still rose early each day to train. A man, surprised, is impressed that even a prodigy like Abel dedicated himself to daily practice. A man, feeling discouraged, admits he might lack the talent to become a swordsman. Ryo shares wisdom from the strongest champion he knows, who once explained that talent is the ability to persist, and perseverance builds true strength. He then challenges a man, asking if he wants to continue or give up. Fueled with determination, a man declares he won't quit and vows to keep pushing forward. The next morning, as the sun rises, Ryo is crouched beside a bed in room 10, where all other beds are empty. Outside, Iman is seen running, panting and sweating heavily. Hito and Nils observe from a distance as a man continues his outdoor training. A boy asks a girl if they'll have to run too, and she confirms they will. Ryo, finishing his preparations and reaching the door, notices them heading outside. Pleased by their commitment, he hums cheerfully. Then, a bag is dropped heavily onto a table, and someone remarks that it should suffice. Nana mentions her impressive book collection and asks which books someone wants to purchase. Ryo, the hero, expresses interest in alchemy books. In Luna, there are 2 libraries, one in the north and one in the south, the latter being closer to the Adventurers Guild and offering more beginner-friendly books. The bookstore has 3 books that catch Ryo's attention, but it only sells them, not lending. Ryo is drawn to a book of alchemy recipes, but it costs 10 gold coins, and he only has 5. Recalling the magic stones he earned from defeating wyverns, he decides to return to the guild. Humming happily, Ryo strolls through the streets, pleased that the magic stones fetched a good price, though he reflects that earning money requires effort. The thought of not needing to work for money feels incredibly satisfying. Suddenly, Ryo senses something unusual and looks skyward. Everyone in the street pauses, gazing at a stunning solar eclipse unfolding. Ryo, surprised, didn't know such events occurred in this world as the sun continues to darken. A nearby person wonders aloud what's happening. Abruptly, Ryo feels an unexpected shift. He stops, standing motionless in the street. He wonders if he's been cast into a void or something similar within this fantasy world, feeling as though everything around him has vanished, leaving him alone in emptiness. Ryo considers that moving might alert others nearby and decides on a single course of action. He exhales, his breath forming in the air. Using his magic, he manipulates the moisture to create a sonar-like effect. The moisture eventually detects something nearby. The detected figure appears human-sized but slightly different. Ryo launches an attack, summoning a powerful 10-layer ice barrier. 10 massive ice walls form rapidly before him. A voice suddenly echoes in his mind, questioning if he's human. Ryo realizes that whatever broke his ice barrier must be formidable. He wondered why the voice sounded so near. The voice returned, praising Ryo as an impressive specimen. Ryo stayed still, using his sonar to anticipate what might happen. The source of the voice was revealed as a demon woman with curved. The woman praised the strength of Ryo's ice magic, calling it formidable. Ryo visualized her, wondering if she was an Akuma. A massive fire wave roared toward him with a deafening sound. Doubting he could stop it, Ryo summoned an ice barrier to shield himself as the woman smiled, unleashing her magic. Seconds later, Ryo wondered if the attack had ended. His barrier shattered, startling him. An air spear then shot toward his heart, striking him and sending him flying several meters. Ryo recovered, thinking that was a close call. Approaching him, the woman noted her air spear failed to pierce Ryo, staring at him. She remarked his cloak, likely from the Fairy King, might have saved him, but he still defended well. She declared she'd have to cut him down herself, revealing her intent to kill. Ryo swiftly drew his sword with incredible speed. The woman appeared before him, her sword raised for a lethal strike. Ryo barely dodged, with little time to react as she launched another attack. They clashed swords fiercely, the woman smiling as she parried Ryo's strikes. During their duel, both cast magic simultaneously, their powers colliding and causing an explosion that knocked them back, halting their attacks. The woman seized the moment to praise Ryo's rapid spell casting, calling him a monster. Ryo retorted that he'd rather not be called that by her. Realizing Ryo understood her, she deemed him highly dangerous. After another explosion, the Akuma vowed to kill him as they resumed their sword fight. Ryo wondered if she hadn't already been trying to kill him. Amid the clash, he conjured and hurled an ice spear at her. The woman easily deflected the spear, but Ryo used the moment to summon countless ice spears around her, to no avail. They stared at each other as the mist from his water magic cleared. She taunted Ryo, asking if that was all he had, and he replied it was far from it. Ryo unleashed a relentless barrage of ice spears at the Akuma, then fired corrosive water jets. She raised a barrier to block the assaults. Using all his water magic, Ryo summoned rain that drenched the city, pouring down on the Akuma. The woman, pleased at blocking Ryo's attacks, stood in the rain. She then sensed something odd about the falling water as Ryo said boil. The Akuma screamed in agony as the rain boiled upon her skin, scorching her flesh. She cried out, focusing on her counterattack. A massive explosion burst around the Akuma, forcing Ryo to back away to avoid being caught. Panting and weary, Ryo stared at the Akuma. The woman said her time was up, noting she hadn't enjoyed a fight this much in ages, and Ryo demanded she leave. Observing her regeneration, she remarked that Ryo enjoyed the battle too, and admitted she couldn't control the eclipse-created space. Ryo watched her warily. She introduced herself as Lena Eureka Albuquerque and asked for his name, but he called her Akuma. Shocked, she said she should have destroyed him, even at her last breath, for knowing her true form. Calling herself Leonora, she said time was short and he wasn't easily defeated, bidding him farewell with a promise to meet again. Ryo, clearly against a reunion, made that plain to her. Leonora told him to stop, warning that his power ensured he'd encounter her or similar foes again, urging him not to die to others. She vowed to kill him next time, stronger than before, and bid Ryo goodbye. As if awakening, Ryo returned to the city spot he'd been before the void. He questioned if he was truly back, found a bench, and sat to process the event. Breathing a sigh of relief, he realized he'd survived. He recalled nearly dying against a killer eagle with magic nullification. Unlike that fight, Leonora effortlessly dodged and shattered his ice spears. A sudden chest pain reminded him of her air spear strike, and he thought he was injured. He thanked his master for the cloak, believing it prevented a severe wound. Though the cloak was unscathed, he touched the painful spot and instantly regretted it. Reflecting on Leonora's attacks, he wondered if they were magic, given their immense power and her lightning-fast strikes, as if using air magic for speed. He noted her mention of time running out, likely tied to the solar eclipse, and realized the fight space existed only then, damaging only them, not the city. He admitted much about the event confused him. With no time to linger, Ryo decided to buy an alchemy book, return to his room, and research Akumas, as even his mentor knew nothing about them. He recalled asking Abel, who only knew of demons, not Akumas, and figured if Abel, possibly a noble's third son, was unaware, finding answers would be hard. Ryo stood, resolved to buy the book and head to the dorm. Later, arriving at an empty room, he wondered if his roommates were still training. Nils, panting, boasted he'd have floored everyone if not so tired. A group of 5 mocked him, saying nothing beats a defeated dog's cry. Edo retorted that was rich from ambushers. One man asked if they expected monsters to warn them or pause when they were tired, stressing they must always be ready. Nearby, Ryo noticed something odd to his left. A man approached Nils, warning he should be grateful the fight wasn't real. Nils cursed at him, but Ryo remarked that those who lower their guard only have themselves to blame. Ice spears shot up from the ground, targeting the men's backs. The man near Nils noticed his friends being struck. Stepping forward, Ryo asked if the man wanted to know what happened, explaining he used ice spears to hit his friends from behind. The man tried to curse Ryo, but Ryo cut him off, saying one should never relax their vigilance. He sarcastically asked if he was expected to warn before attacking, as the man had told Nils about monsters. Ryo declared this was the consequence of their carelessness. Nils grumbled that the situation was annoying, noting they'd been running every morning and would switch to weekends to conserve energy. Ryo addressed the man, still standing dumbfounded, and Nils identified him as Dan from room 4. Recognizing Dan, Ryo asked what he'd do next. With his friends caught off guard, Dan might flee in shame. Instead, Dan drew his sword, vowing not to retreat, and charged recklessly. Ryo sidestepped and struck Dan's ribs with his sword's hilt. Dan crumpled in pain, and Rio rejoined his friends. Rio thought he'd have hurt Dan more with his fists due to the armor, but the hilt still caused significant harm. He mentioned nearly dying earlier, suggesting adrenaline from that fight lingered, and asked Ito to heal his wounds, showing her the bruise from his Akuma battle. Ito noted the injury looked severe but confirmed no broken bones, though the blow was brutal. She said a hit closer to his heart could have been fatal, then cast a healing spell. Rhea remarked this was what barely surviving looked like, grateful to be alive. When Ito asked what he fought, Rio smiled, saying he'd share another time. Dan, still crouched in agony from Rio's blow, writhed nearby. Rhea reflected on being cornered by Leonora earlier and now easily defeating rank adventurers, finding the contrast absurd. In the bathhouse later, Nils thanked Rio, saying his timely arrival prevented their humiliation. A man remarked that Rio moved fast for a mage. Rio replied that modern mages could move like that, and Nils told him to stop teasing a man. The group laughed, relaxing in the bath. The Kingdom of Knightly in the Central Province had Lune as its largest southern border city. In the Adventurers Guild canteen, Nils said he, a man, and Ito were forming a dungeon party for the next day and invited Rio, who declined, apologizing. Rio explained he had plans in the city. Nils said he expected that, noting Rio's immediate D-rank status and swift defeat of Dan confirmed his roommate's suspicions of a vast power gap. Dungeon trips were easier with strong adventurers, but this stressed both stronger and weaker members. The guild advised forming parties of similar strength. As an outsider, Rio was an exception, starting stronger than typical new adventurers. Even the guild couldn't have foreseen someone like him joining the dorms. The next day, Monday, his friends bid Rio farewell as they left for the dungeon. Rio planned to hone his magic control and stamina by running around Lune's city walls, recalling how Leonora's powerful spells had surpassed his, though his casting speed outmatched hers. He aimed to cast magic faster and more precisely, focusing on enhancing his strengths and training his weaknesses until they were strengths too. Despite this, he felt Leonora was far faster physically. He remembered her crossing dozens of meters instantly, likely using wind magic. Rio pondered mimicking this with water magic, considering water jets from his feet, but needed a way to propel from his back without injury. He thought releasing a jet from his neck might work, or perhaps along his entire back, while freezing the ground to glide forward. He estimated he could manage 256 water jets currently. Testing his idea, Rio released a water jet from his back, but it didn't work as hoped, and he fell, admitting defeat to something or someone. He considered he might not be ready yet, but managed 1024 jets, giving him hope. Meanwhile, in the dungeon, Nils told Ito that hunting was quicker with another swordsman, especially against goblins, which Emman said were easier than wolves due to their slowness. Nils suggested a break, recommending salt licking and water. A man recalled salt being mentioned yesterday, but forgot the context, unrelated to performance or healing magic. Nils explained it was a village tradition for post-sweat recovery. Ito, concerned about Emman's wounds, joined Nils in resting, noting the fight was close. Nils remarked that goblin archers shouldn't be on the 5th floor, making him uneasy about proceeding. Ito agreed, deciding to return early but pleased they looted more than usual, even splitting 3 ways. At the Adventurers Guild Hall, Nils shyly greeted Nine, who asked if they finished early, prompting a stammering reply. Nils confirmed and began complimenting Nine, but Ito cut in, explained to Nine they returned early due to a 5th-floor goblin archer, showing her a magic stone. Nine verified it was from a goblin archer as she inspected it. Nine said she'd notify the guild master and update records, as such reports were rare. Nils tried speaking to Nine again, but Ito interrupted, saying they needed to sell their magic stones while the guild master handled paperwork. A knock came and he invited the visitor in. Nine entered, reporting a goblin archer on the 5th floor. The guild master, stunned, paused and asked her to repeat. He said archers should only appear from the 10th floor, and Nine confirmed the report. He called it a sign and asked which B-rank adventure groups were in Lune. Nine listed the Crimson Swords and White Brigade, and when the guild master asked about Felt's brigade, she confirmed they returned 2 days ago and remained in town. He instructed her to ensure both groups were at the guild within an hour. Abel noted even the White Brigade was summoned, admitting he struggled to deal with them. Rhea questioned how Abel could say that given their childhood friendship. Lynn remarked that Abel always complained and should emulate Warren's silence sometimes. The Crimson Swords reached the guild master's door, knocked, and were invited in. Feltz, captain of Highlands and vice-captain of the White Brigade, greeted Abel as they entered. Abel returned the greeting, but Feltz noted his stiffness. The guild master said they likely knew why they were summoned, thanking them for coming, and explained it was about goblin archers on the 5th floor. Abel asked how certain he was, and the guild master confirmed he was completely sure. He displayed a goblin archer's magic stone, explaining 3 F-rank adventurers, including an archer, encountered goblins on the 5th floor. Abel said it was promising that an F-rank group defeated goblins with an archer. The guild master clarified it was Nils' group, praising Nils as a level-headed adventurer with a bright future. Abel asked if that was Rio's roommate's group. The guild master confirmed it was Nils, Ido, and a man. Surprised Abel knew them. Abel said he met them briefly and believed they'd become great adventurers, valuing survival. Ben Feltz, White Brigade leader, cut in, asking what was expected of them. With goblin archers confirmed on the 5th floor, Feltz asked what the guild master wanted. He requested the Crimson Swords and White Brigade to investigate the dungeon for signs of another great surge, when monster populations spike and higher floor beasts appear above. The guild master offered 100 gold coins upfront and 200 more upon return. Abel sought clarification, asking if they only needed to check for a great surge. The guild master confirmed, instructing them to return immediately if one was detected. He outlined using the double barrier to block monsters from the city, then defending with knights and planning a counterattack. He asked them to enter the dungeon the next morning, barring new adventurers meanwhile, with staff at the dungeon entrance stopping others, and asked if they accepted. Abel said the Crimson Swords agreed, and Feltz confirmed for the White Brigade. On Tuesday, past 9 in the morning, someone asked if their report led to new details. A man with Nils and Ido said the guild posted a notice based on their report. A man wondered where Rio was, recalling he mentioned the library. A guild announcement declared dungeon expeditions suspended from Tuesday until further notice. On a cloudy Tuesday morning in Lune, past 9, Rio headed to the Southern Library, hoping to find books on Akumas and learn more about his new world. Meanwhile, a man, Ido, and Nils raid the guild's bulletin board, noting the dungeon suspension. Ido suggested more information came after their report. In the dungeon, Abel met Feltz, who, seeing the group size, confirmed only half the White Brigade -20 C rank and higher adventurers came, leaving D rank and below in the city, ready to move. Shocked, Abel glanced aside, noting the guild master's presence, who reminded them he'd said yesterday he'd be at the dungeon entrance branch for quick decisions upon their return. He urged them to move, but Abel asked for a moment, expressing unease about the 1st floor and requesting Lynn to scan it with wind magic. Lynn agreed, casting her spell skyward. Soon after, she reported over 100 monsters on the 1st floor alone. Feltz shouted that the Great Surge had begun, and the guild master ordered everyone to rush to the stairs top and alert the knights' barracks for aid. After they retreated through the doorway, a huge metal door slammed shut, sealing the stairs. A man confirmed all had reached the top and the entrance was secured, but fearfully noted beastly claws bending a nearby grate as countless goblins swarmed the halls. A fierce battle erupted with goblins roaring. Abel instructed using long-range magic and arrows, with the vanguard shielding mages and archers from enemy spells and projectiles. Arrows from the heroes struck, felling many goblins. At the Adventurers Guild, 9 announced via megaphone that the Great Tide brought beasts into the city, authorizing long-range attacks. Archers lined the dungeon gate walls, readying arrows as 9 reminded them to stay hydrated. Abel observed it was mostly goblins and some archers, predicting an endurance battle, while Lynn said they'd need to defeat them to reach the bosses. Abel noted only goblins were present, relentless until the general, who wouldn't appear easily, was killed. A goblin mage emerged, and someone warned of incoming magical attacks. A warrior spotted the guild master, urging him to the dungeon's north wall, where warriors clashed directly with goblins. The guild master, seeing this, wondered if the knights had depleted their arrows. He rallied the knights, saying together they could crush the goblin wave easily. An earth mage chanted, summoning a stone wall to shield Feltz from attacks. The mage declared the goblins would soon fall, with goblin mages next. Feltz sliced a beast in half with his spear. Exhausted, Abel drove his sword into the ground amidst the goblin horde. Nearby, Warren flung goblins skyward with his shield. Abel, faintly smiling, defeated another goblin archer, urging everyone to hold on a bit longer. The goblin before Abel lost its essence as distant noise grew. Feltz and Abel stared at the 1st floor's far end, where 3 oversized goblins appeared, unsettling Abel. With 3 goblin generals and countless goblins defeated, it pointed to a goblin king deeper in the dungeon. Goblin kings, reported every few decades, led thousands and could raise cities. With over 10,000 goblins in the dungeon, a king's presence was likely, though unprecedented in dungeons. Abel told Feltz he didn't know the king's strength but wanted to defeat the generals before the king emerged. Abel declared he'd handle one goblin general, assigning another to the White Brigade's leader, leaving the third to the remaining groups. With a swift leap, Abel charged a goblin general, striking it up close, but the blow barely fazed the enemy. A mage hurled a fireball between Abel and the beast, interrupting their close combat. Abel gained some distance, plotting his next move. The goblin general lunged fiercely at him, but Abel skillfully dodged to the side. Feltz, coordinating their tactics, shared a warrior's grin with Abel, reveling in the fight. The White Brigade leader unleashed a spinning attack on his goblin general. Moments later, both noticed something odd from the first floor's rear. Abel yelled for everyone to duck as a massive white lightning bolt struck the three goblin generals from the waist up. The warriors crouched, covering their ears as the bolt roared overhead. One asked if that was the Goblin King as a monstrous beast emerged. Abel wondered if it aimed to kill them alongside its generals, noting the attack involved only an arm movement, no chant, suggesting powerful magic. Deciding to stay close, he shouted that he and Feltz would tackle the beast. As they neared the Goblin King, its sudden attack startled them. Abel angled his sword to block the beast's strike, straining under its force, while Feltz spotted an opening. Feltz attacked the beast's arm with his spear during its assault, prompting a roar from the monster. Abel kept his gaze locked on the creature. Together, they hammered the monster with relentless strikes, fighting with fierce determination. The beast took heavy damage from the two skilled warriors. In a careless moment, Abel tripped, cursing as he fell, and the Goblin King seized the chance to charge him. Abel yelled for Feltz to duck, and the White Brigade leader rushed toward him, calling his name. Abel activated his absolute shadow combat technique as the Goblin King barreled forward, preparing a punch. When it closed in, Abel unleashed his perfect piercing sword technique, striking the beast directly. He called to Lin to attack while he pinned it. From afar, Lin and another saw the colossal beast Abel battled. Abel used absolute shadow again, the technique's impact sending wind and dust across the distant city. Back in the dungeon, a large dark mark scarred the ground, and Lin looked utterly stunned. The Goblin King, with a gaping dark wound on its chest, fell to its knees before Abel. Feltz approached, seeing the beast kneeling in a dark pool. Abel stood in disbelief at the scene. In the tavern, a packed crowd cheered with raised mugs, celebrating something Rio was unaware of. A man spotted Rio, calling him over. Rio joined them, and Nils declared he'd eat enough for a week. A man greeted Rio, thrilled he arrived for the party's start, inviting him to eat and drink freely. A delicious plate of food, courtesy of the guild, was set before Rio. Nils, as lively as ever, arrived late, urging Rio to grab a mug and plate from the side and eat freely. Still confused, Rio finally asked what the celebration was for. They explained a great surge happened that day, a rare event he'd learned about in the seminar, occurring every few years. Realizing they survived the great surge, Rio understood the victory celebration. In his mind, he just wanted to secure a plate before Nils continued his tale. Soon, Nils began raving about Abel's incredible battle skills, equally adept with a bow as with a sword, nearly defeating the Goblin King single-handedly. Rio wondered why Abel only almost defeated the king. Nils clarified that Lin delivered the final blow, but only because Abel pinned the beast, shouting for others to attack. Rio noted it would have been disastrous if Abel had been hit, guessing it was a wind spell. Ito, who'd been dozing beside Nils, woke and said it was Bullet Rain, a rare, high-level spell. Nils, startled, glanced at Ito, who promptly fell back into a food-induced nap. Raya remarked that Bullet Rain sounded cool, and Nils agreed, explaining it unleashed dozens of invisible blades, relieved none hit Abel. A voice added that Abel avoided them using his combat arts. Abel appeared beside the boys, striking a heroic pose. Rio asked about combat arts, and Abel explained they were swordsmanship techniques, like Absolute Shadow, which helped dodge magical and long-range attacks. Rio thought the name was awesome, and Abel, expecting the comment, laughed. Rio said Nils had been praising Abel's heroism, embarrassing Nils, who tried to hide. Abel said Nils and his friends were vital, reloading Archer's arrows, preventing a loss, and Nils stood proudly, barely containing his excitement. Abel added they'd have won easier with Rio, asking where he was. Rio said he was at the library, joking he didn't steal Abel's victory moment, and Abel told him to hush. Lin and Rhea arrived, saying they found Abel, knowing he'd be with Rio, worried about him. Flustered, Abel denied it, saying he only mentioned the battle would have been easier with Rio. Rhea relayed a message from the guild master. He'd report to the Margrave tomorrow at noon, and Abel must attend. Rio teased that it was a grand reward for Abel's stellar performance. Abel insisted Lin landed the final blow, but she told him to stop shirking credit. Lin said her spell succeeded only because Abel pinned the goblin with his sword, then turned to Rio, asking if he could summon tall ice walls from a distance, as Abel claimed. Smiling, Rio confirmed he could create ice walls up to 40 meters high in the sky above him. Lin, astonished, began to speak, but Rio cut in, saying it was tough at first and required lots of practice to master. Still shocked, Rio glanced aside, warning others to stop their risky behavior. A chaotic argument erupted among the young adults, something fell to the floor, and they called for a cloth to clean it up. 5 days after the Great Tide Battle, a man passed a group of 5 hooded figures on the street, instantly recognizing them as the research group. At the guild headquarters, Nils stood before the mission board, disappointed, noting it was empty. 9, nearby, apologized, explaining that the past 2 days saw all E and F rank missions taken, with the purchasing department halting new ones temporarily. Nils, stumbling over his words, told 9 loudly it wasn't her fault, blaming the purchasing department, then thanked her for her efforts. Edo and a man appeared behind him as Rio, slightly embarrassed, approached, learning they came for missions and why none were available. They asked if Rio was shopping. He said he sought magic copper for alchemy practice, but the purchasing department wasn't selling. He planned to gather it on the dungeon's 5th floor, unconcerned, though local shops were out of stock. A man asked if magic copper was really on the 5th floor, and Nils wondered if it was costly. Rio replied that a fist-sized piece last sold for 500,000 florins or 50 gold coins. Edo explained the guild's tension with alchemists drove up magic copper prices in the city. Rio offered the group a mission, asking if they'd accept it from him. He revealed magic copper could be found at an abandoned mine near Russi village, a half-day walk away, offering 4 coins per person and 25 per fist-sized piece, provided everyone returned safely. The group eagerly accepted, with M1 praising the terms. Rio calculated it was cheaper than buying directly and noted it wasn't a guild mission, so it wouldn't boost their rank, but they were fine with that. The 3 friends set off for the mine. Rio could have gone himself, but chose to help his roommates earn money, having enough himself and preferring not to give handouts. While they collected magic copper, Rio could practice alchemy with city-bought materials. At the northern bookstore, unlike the southern one, books were specialized, not general. Lin approached a special engraved door to the restricted archives, accessible only to Margrave-authorized individuals or B-rank and higher adventurers. The archives held secret materials, including high-level spells of all elements and forbidden magic. After researching, Lin concluded the spell wasn't listed, confirming no spells created distant ice walls. In the Central Nations, all mage spells and incantations were cataloged, including her Goblin King defeating spell. High-level magic demanded experienced mages, as spells could destroy their users, hence the restricted access. Yet Lin found no record of Rio's combat spells, which relied on incantations to produce magical effects. Anyone with magical talent can cast spells using incantations. As they become more skilled in magic, they move from simple to more complex spells, including intermediate and advanced ones. However, there is a unique type of magic that doesn't require incantations, and thinking of Rio, she likens it to a water-based version of the explosive magic used by Fire Mage, a renowned fire mage known for performing unprecedented high-level magic that no one had ever witnessed before. She struggles to comprehend how magic can function without incantations, and the concept of original magic is even more perplexing to her. A woman emerges from the shadows behind Lin, remarking that it's been a long time since they last saw each other. Lin begins to turn to see who could approach so silently. She quickly spots a long, slender sword at the woman's waist. Then she recognizes Sarah, the only B-rank member of the Wind Group still in the city of Lu. Lin greets Sarah with a smile. The girl then inquires what Lin is doing in such an unusual location. Lin explains she was researching something but found nothing, and mentions hearing that Sarah was away on missions from the capital. Sarah confirms she was indeed away but returned yesterday. She then bids farewell, noting she's heading to the library, which is waiting for her. Feeling frustrated, Lin decides she might as well go home. From room 10 in the Adventurers Guild dorm, the courtyard and training area are visible. While Nils, Ito, and Amon were out on a mission assigned by Rio, our hero was testing new formulas and successfully created his first antidote. After crafting his first antidote, someone suddenly shouts near a boy, demanding that he stop. Rio halts his work and looks to the side, alert, wondering about the cause of the shouting. We then see Dan from room 1, declaring that a girl clearly isn't interested and telling the men to leave her alone. One man is gripping the young woman, insisting she can serve drinks for them, and if she performs well, they might keep her around during their stay in the city. Through a low window, Rio observes the scene in the courtyard. He identifies the men as knights, attempting to exploit a young woman who recently became an adventurer around Amon's age. He also notices Dan standing nearby. The men comment that if she lives there, she must be a new, struggling adventurer, and they could assist her. They suggest she could keep them company for the night, while the girl said no. Ryo hopes he won't have to step in. He reflects that there are likely many places in the city where the men could seek entertainment. They could have simply gone to one of those. Dan then shouts at the men, stating that the girl said no, and if they don't stop harassing her, they'll face a beating. One of the knights turns to Dan, challenging him to repeat what he said. He releases the girl, who runs to Dan, and declares he'll teach the adventurers a lesson in manners. The girl hides behind Dan, who shields her, joined by 2 other adventurers. The knight draws his sword, stating he won't kill a boy, only teach a lesson, and that Dan should be thankful for it. Dan, accompanied by another adventurer, faces the knight tensely, bracing for the moment the men will charge. Suddenly, the knight flips through the air and crashes face first onto the ground. Dan is stunned, unable to grasp what just occurred. Then Mike, cursing, struggles to stand and orders the adventurer to stay still. As Mike rises slightly, he vows to teach the adventurer a lesson. But he collapses again, this time landing on his back. One of the knight's companions questions Dan about what he did to their friend. Dan insists he did nothing, explaining that the man is simply falling to the ground on his own. Trembling with fury, the knight attempts once more to rise and lunge at Dan, but he collapses face first onto the ground, unable to remain standing. Dan stands in disbelief, observing the man's repeated failed attempts to stand and attack, only to fall each time. The mage friends, like the adventurers, watch motionless, equally puzzled and unable to comprehend the strange scene unfolding before them. From his low window, Ryo observes the situation calmly. Then Phelps, the head of the White Brigade, steps forward and commands them to end the spectacle. Dan instantly recognizes Phelps, while the knight finally manages to stand. He rudely demands to know who the long-haired man who just appeared is. Phelps retorts that they behaved so disgracefully yet dared to call themselves Knights of the Realm, urging them to feel ashamed of their actions. The knight, seething with rage, claims an adventurer is trying to lecture him on manners. Someone cuts him off, telling him to be quiet. Phelps clarifies that this isn't about being an adventurer, it's about being a knight and acting with honor. The knight boasts that no one defies the Knights of the Realm, threatening that, if they choose, they could have the Adventurers Guild's leader exiled from the city. Phelps, leader of the White Brigade, acknowledges he is an adventurer but also a noble of the realm. He introduces himself as Phelps, a direct heir of the Marcus Heinlein family. One knight exchanges a fearful glance with another upon hearing Heinlein, and the other mentions that the captain of the Royal Knights is Alex Heinlein. Phelps confirms that Alex Heinlein, the current head of the Marcus Heinlein family, is indeed his father. The knight who had fallen retreats to his companions. Phelps shouts at them to stop tarnishing the Royal Knight's reputation and to leave his sight immediately. The boys thank the warrior, and Phelps assures them it's fine. He says there's no need for thanks, as the knight's behavior infuriated him. He commends Dan for his courage and instructs him to escort the girl back to her friends. Ryo, still watching from his low window, sees the adventurers starting to disperse. Phelps notices him at the window, asks if he's Ryo, and Ryo confirms his identity. The warrior expresses his pleasure at meeting Ryo, introducing himself as the White Brigade's leader and mentioning he heard about Ryo from Abel, confirming Ryo's use of remarkable magic. Ryo humbly says it's no big deal and that Phelps doesn't need to mention it. Phelps remarks that all he saw was the knight charging at the adventurers and falling foolishly to the ground. Thanks to Ryo's intervention, Phelps bows to our hero, expressing gratitude on behalf of Loon's adventurers. As Phelps begins to bow, Ryo insists it's unnecessary, noting his history with Dan and that Dan wouldn't have accepted his help even if offered, so he acted discreetly. Phelps agrees, echoing Abel's words about Ryo's unique nature. Ryo ponders what Abel has been telling others about him. The White Brigade leader explains that Abel spoke of Ryo during the Great Tide celebration, noting how much easier it would have been with Ryo present. He adds that Abel rarely praises anyone so highly, and that Ryo was the one who ensured the warriors' survival and safe return to the city, preventing the loss of a boat, which would have been catastrophic for Loon. Phelps expresses deep gratitude for Ryo's role in keeping the warrior alive and bringing him back. A woman then appears at the door, informing the leader that it's nearly time to depart. Phelps thanks Ryo, apologizes for needing to leave, and says he'd love to continue their conversation another time. As Ryo watches Phelps depart, he admits he's feeling exhausted too. A joyful grin spreads across Ryo's face. He reflects that both the woman who came to fetch the leader and the leader himself are remarkably powerful, questioning whether it's truly acceptable for the heir of such a prominent family to be an adventurer.
Hey, if you enjoyed the video, don't forget to hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow. And if you want more content like this, make sure to subscribe and turn on the bell so you never miss an upload. Thanks for watching.